Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 152 of the Nope Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Culberg. The courage to be disliked. So I woke up this morning at 4 a.m. to present at the Unity Conscious Summit, which was fabulous. I was so appreciative to be invited. And I spoke about saying no to others so that we can say yes to ourselves. And we opened up at the end for question and answers. And if anyone listening to this was there at the summit, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And if you're listening to this the day it publishes, you can still sign up and grab the replay. So I'd encourage you to do so. It's available for 48 hours. So it's a get in quick kind of thing. The courage to be disliked. A lot of the questions centered around, if I say no to someone, they might not like me anymore. And there's so many directions I could go with this conversation. First of all, do we want people in our lives who it's a conditional like? They only like us if we fulfill a role for them, if we do things for them. You know, it makes me think like is a button on Facebook. Whereas I desire to foster people, relationships, connections in my life who love me, not just like me as long as I will drop everything to help them, as long as I will, the courage to be disliked. So if somebody asks you to do something and you say, thanks for inviting me, but that's a no from me, or I'm not available at the moment, or this isn't really in my wheelhouse or jam, or, you actually turn them down. If that means that they don't want to be a friend or a connection anymore, is it really a loss? Like, it might sound hard to hear that, but the courage to, speak your truth and not make it mean anything about them, but, at this time, this isn't a match for you, or this is a no for you, and have it be okay without having to explain or justify. And the thing I spoke about on the summit is, if you are currently a yes person, a people pleaser, always the one who does the things, initially there may be a pushback. And this is the moment of conviction, of sticking through, that it can be the tough point. But once you're through to the other side, this is just who you are. It's like, this is just who I am now. It's only challenging in the beginning. And I likened it to, say, for example, you decided to get fit and you wanted to do bicep curls. You want to build your biceps. If you go to the gym and right now you are capable of lifting 1 pound dumbbells and curling them, and down the line, ideally, you'd like to be able to lift 20-pound dumbbells. If you go immediately to the 20-pound section, you may not even be able to lift them off the bench. Even if you do, you may do an injury, or you can't physically sustain that. And then you think, oh, this doesn't work. So often when I coach people, I listen to this show and I give an idea on a concept and I chat to them. It can be like, oh, I tried that once. And it's like going to the gym when you're currently at the ability to lift 1 pound and trying to do a workout with 20 pounds and being like, well, I just tried that once. It's to sustainably do that. It's about getting the reps in. So if you're currently a person who says yes to everything and you're noodling around this idea of saying no and having the courage to be disliked, the very next time someone asks you to do something, your gut instinct, your initial reaction, your automatic reflex to say yes will probably kick in. And then later you'll be like, oh, I forgot. Doesn't mean you tried that once. Doesn't mean you failed. It's like, oh, okay. So the next time you may remember and you may fumble and be like, oh, I can't really, but I can move things around. This is you getting in the reps. You can't get good at what you don't do. So it's like finding the rhythm and flow and things that work for you. Another thing we spoke about on this summit is, if somebody asks you to do something for them and it's time sensitive, like I need this thing done, and you are not available, you could be like, I'm committed currently. If you don't find anyone, get back to me next week. That way you're putting the ball back in their court to follow up with you again. And if it is urgent and as time sensitive as they say, they may then find somebody else in that time. So it's really realizing that, is it going to risk the relationship? And often it's only in our heads. If we do say no, or no, thank you, or I'm not available, then most people are like, oh, that's fine. And they move on to someone else. It's the story that we tell ourselves that builds up and up and up in our heads. So, for example, I've been a coach now for 6 years. I first started coaching in 2017, and I was very much a people pleaser back then. And I would take coaching calls at all sorts of times that were inconvenient for me. My calls would go over. I would allow people to reschedule at the last minute. If they turned up late, I would stay on. I would answer my messages anytime, day or night. And there was one day I was in the park with my kids, and Casimir, he's my son, he was only very young at the time. He looked at me because my phone dinged and I was responding to it. And he said, "You love your phone more than me." And in that moment, my heart broke. And that was the wake-up call that I needed to begin to set some boundaries. And I was so concerned that if I told clients that, I wasn't contactable at certain times, or I didn't work weekends or things like that, that my business would fail and nobody would want to work with me. In fact, the opposite was true, because people can't respect your boundaries if they don't know what they are. Often we're like, oh, they're messaging me all sorts of times, or they're ringing me all sorts of times, because you've never told them when you're available and when you're not, and also lovingly reminded and upheld that yourself. So when clients come to work with me now, I'm like, this is when you can contact me, and this is when you can't. This is when you can expect a response from me, and this is when I won't respond. And it's, for some people, they don't like that. And that's okay. They can go and find a best fit coach who is more available than me. And it's about, what's in service. When you think about airlines, we've all heard the spiel, fit your own oxygen mask first, whether you've flown or not. I did say something on one episode that we've all flown, and I will apologize for that. We haven't all flown, but we're aware of when you fly on an airplane, you're instructed to fit your own oxygen mask first. Because if you don't, when the oxygen drops low enough, you will pass out, and then you cannot help anyone. So part of the courage to be disliked is working out what is acceptable and what is unacceptable to you. That doesn't mean these things are universally right or wrong. It doesn't mean people who think or feel or act in a different way are wrong. It just means that that is crossing a boundary, or that is unacceptable to you. And communicating that in a way that is loving and caring and understanding and not demanding, and risking that, perhaps this friendship, relationship, work situation, connection isn't a right fit for now, or maybe forever. But the relief you feel when you get to speak your truth and what works for you. The other example I gave on the summit is, when you're in a job and someone asks you to do something for them that will just take 5 minutes, it usually ends up taking 2 hours. They often make this request at 4:50 when you finish at 5 p.m. and often on a Friday. Now, how many of us just smile and nod and go along and do the thing, and don't actually say at a future date, like the next day or the next week, actually, that thing that you said would take 5 minutes actually took me 2 hours. So in future, if you need help with this, I'm available, but I need some more notice. Or you could say something like, I'm curious, how would it take 5 minutes? Could you show me? Because sometimes, I'm thinking, I'm going all around the place today, so I apologize, you guys, for staying with me. But this show, when I launched this show, I basically had a Word document, and I put the title of the episode and the number. And then I soon realized that I was misplacing the numbers. So some of you who have messaged me and said, thank you so much. I don't have perfectionistic tendencies. It is what it is. So I decided to upgrade my Word document to a spreadsheet. Now, I'm not very good with Excel, and I mucked around with it for a couple of minutes, and I ended up asking my husband, who is an Excel whiz, and what he could do in 5 minutes would have taken me literally hours. So if he said, hey, could you do this Excel thing? It would take 5 minutes. For him, it would. But for me, it would take hours. So sometimes I think, the courage to be disliked is we inadvertently become mind readers, and we think that people think like we do. We all do this, or that they know what we're thinking. And so when we say, hey, do this thing, it'll take 5 minutes, we don't consider that they might not have the skill set that we have, or we might not realize that we have grossly underestimated the time required. So all this to say, to like wrap this up into a neat little bow, this episode, when someone asks you to do something that you either don't want to do, don't have the capacity or availability to do, or maybe want to do, but not right now, are you able to say no without explanation? How does that feel in your body? Like, just the thought of it for some people might be like, I feel the pressure rising. And are you willing to get the reps in to build up this muscle, to be courageous enough to risk the relationship and potentially be disliked by others so that you can feel good inside you? Because there's a quote I love by Brené Brown. She says, choose discomfort over resentment. And often there is so much discomfort in having the conversation, like, no, thank you, or not right now, or I'm basically saying no. But the discomfort in the moment far trumps the resentment when we say yes, and in our heads we're like, oh, I don't really want to do this, and our body is screaming, and we're like so like seething. I can just feel that seething. It's like, I will bake these cookies for the school sale, even though I don't really want to. But the discomfort to say no, well, thank you for asking me, but no. And realizing that over time, the more that you do this, the easier it gets. It will be uncomfortable for the first 5, 10, 20, maybe even 50 times. But there will come a time where it will be easy. Like if you think of a skill, something like tying your shoelace. Now I'm sure that you tie your shoelace without even thinking about it. You might look down and go, oh, my shoelace is undone, and you just tie it. Trust me, there was a time when you put a lot of thought into that. You were like, this loops over this, and I pull it, and then I make the bunny's ears and I loop it, and like it required a lot of attention. This is front of mind for me because we've just nailed this with Casimir. But there will come a time when saying no and choosing that, having that courage to be disliked, will just be who you are now. But you need to get the reps in. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you. If you enjoy it, please comment on the YouTube or share the episode. Who do you know who needs to hear this message? I really appreciate all of you who forward the show to friends and family, share it up on social media, comment on YouTube. This is my appreciation for you. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.